Hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar titled How Xavier University Increased Their Open Rate by 160% among one of those demographics that we are all struggling with, the Millennials. Right now we are working through some audio issues with everyone. If you are still having audio issues, please send us another message in your chat box, but if everyone can hear and we are good to go, we are going to continue. I am super excited about today and talking with you. Before we get started, I want to go over just our typical housekeeping issues as we do webinars to make sure that this is an awesome experience for you. If you have a question today, we really want this to be interactive. We want to make sure that we get your questions answered in the moment. So make sure that you go ahead and enter them right in the chat box that's at the bottom left-hand side of your screen. Are we recording this? Yes. I guarantee you are going to sit at your desk and you're going to think, I wish my whole team could have heard this. No problem. We're going to email you a link and everyone in your department can hear this. You'll be able to share it campus-wide. This isn't your typical webinar. Sometimes you might have sat on webinars and you have to sit through the whole hour or the whole 2 hours and get to the very end to get the gold nugget that you needed. And that's not how we've really structured our webinars. Every single screen, every single point is designed and choreographed to empower you with information that you can use today, that you can adapt to your departments, and that will really arm you with information that can help you develop a plan and really provide the why behind you should go down this road to engage your millennials. If you have technical difficulties, we have engagement specialists on standby. Feel free to call the number on your screen and we can help you. If your screen isn't advancing, if the sound isn't working, let us know. And we'd love to hear from you throughout this whole thing. We are going to be tweeting live. We are even live at on Xavier's campus today, and so excited to have Scott Chadwick with us. Feel free to tweet at him and at Cerkl. A little bit about me. My name is Sarah Jackson, and I've worn a couple different hats. Have worked at the Chamber, have worked for the NFL with the Cincinnati Bengals, worked at a local public sewer district and the 5th largest school district in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. And I share this because I have sat in similar seats that you've sat in with this need of how do you engage your audience? How do you transform that informative communication to true engagement? This is something that I have thought about a ton. So without further ado, the reason why we're all here, I'm so super excited to have our co-host Scott Chadwick with me today. Scott, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's very good to be here, Sarah.
Scott, you have had lots of experience in higher ed. Share some of the hats that you've worn and kind of what you're passionate about here at Xavier University.
Sure. I started out in industry at Arthur Andersen Consulting and then spent some time as a financial analyst and designed software. I was a student at the University of Iowa, got my PhD at the University of Kansas, and then taught at Oregon State University and Iowa State University. For the last 13 years, I've been in administration, first at Creighton University as an assistant and associate vice president for academic affairs, then at Canisius College up in Buffalo, where I was the chief academic officer and the mission and identity officer. And these past 5 years, I've been provost and chief academic officer here at Xavier University.
Well, I love that we get to tap into all of these years of experience and to share all of the great innovative things that you're doing here on Xavier's campus. So today we are talking about sort of when we first began our journey together, you were really interested in this idea of with the dynamics of how alumni are changing and getting their information. How do you maintain a relationship at a distance? And I know we've talked about this. So when we first started our journey, what sort of got you thinking about this in different ways?
Well, I've long been a believer that engagement matters. When we talk about how do students orient to a university and how do they become part of the university fabric, how do they become part of the community, It's all about engagement. And all universities try to engage the students from the moment they build their enrollment funnel all the way through to the orientation, trying to decrease summer melt on enrollment. We all have orientation when they come onto campus, variety of activities, and then the faculty and the staff work very hard to find a way to build a connection with the students in the first couple weeks of school. And we know that engagement in the campus community and a professional and deep relationship with the faculty or staff member is the single best predictor of retention across their 4 years or 2 years, whichever type of school that the student is at. So when I first started talking with you and Cerkl about Cerkl and what it was trying to do, what resonated immediately was your focus on engagement and the way you've built this platform to honor the individual, find out what the individual wanted to keep them in the community that they were in when they were a student.
Yes, and I know when we were really diving into this and really studying it, you're right, the faculty and the staff and the development department, the alumni relations department, they are working extremely hard. And I know people that are on today's call are probably feeling frustrated that we do all of these things. Why is it still so difficult to engage alumni? So we're going to go through some of the next several slides that really addresses the why. When Scott and our founder, Tarek Kamil, and I were really digging into this issue, it's kind of like, it's not you. Every university, they're producing great content, great programming, but for whatever reason, there is a miss or has been a miss in getting that right content. So here are some slides, the next few that you're gonna see, things that you can share with your department that might be that cold glass of water to the face, like, I didn't know this. This is why it's becoming so difficult to cut through all the noise and reach those coveted alumni. So the first one, let's take a look at this. Loved this one. Every 2 days now, we create as much information as we did from the dawn of civilization up until 2003. And I really want you to think about that we're producing more content than ever, and universities are as well. So that's all getting disseminated. And I know, with talking with the communication department here and the alumni relations department and development department, they're producing great stuff, but it's a little bit difficult to get it to the right kid or the right alum.
Exactly, and if you think about how professors teach, it's a matter of transitioning from raw data into information, which then moves into knowledge, and over time and experience becomes wisdom. And content that is on the internet or that comes through in texts and phone calls and emails, it doesn't allow people to easily move into the knowledge and wisdom. So we need another way of doing that.
Yes. Next issue here is this. I know this is a big fear. This was something that when we started to tip our toe into the higher education world, we were learning that departments were so scared they were going to unsubscribe. And some dirty little secrets that we also learned from higher ed was that there's this dynamic where the professors have their emails of their students and they don't want to share them with development because they're so afraid that relationship's going to become tainted, right? So this is an issue where the alums are not feeling like the information's relevant anymore. They feel like it's too frequent or it's not delivered in a style that they prefer. And so, with unsubscribing, this is a big fear because legally you can't reach back out to them. So this is something that we uncovered. This is another one. People are frustrated. Here you've got all the same students in the same school, same class, but they're all very, very different with their interest. So this is an issue. And this one, Scott, did you want to touch on this one? I know these are in 60 seconds. This is all the information that your alums are receiving. So how is it that Xavier can cut through all of that?
Yeah, there's just a massive amount of information that's coming at people. And even if you don't actively search for it, it finds its way to you through a variety of sources. We know that we're like every other university or college where our alumni have a great affinity to the university in general. But when we talk with them, it doesn't take 30 seconds before they start talking about, well, it was this professor who changed my life, or it was this staff person, or a friend of mine who I mentor now, who's 3 years out, he said, the person that changed my life, who kept me in school, was one of the people in the cafeteria because she got to know me, and she was the one who would always talk to me. So he wants to give back to her and the work that she does because he knows it's going to matter. So when we look at this screen and all these sources of information, what we at Xavier need to do is to figure out how to extract the value from each of those channels as it exists with respect to what the alumnus cares about.
Yes. And then you have this issue where each alumnus has different expectations. So you've got the baby boomer who even, I've heard likes a printed mail newsletter to their home, right? Down to what we're going to be talking about, the millennial. So talk about this issue with this whole demographic range of from the old to the young. They all like to communicate differently.
Sure. 10, 20 years ago, what we used to focus on were the channels. And we would say, you have a message with an intent, you have an audience. So pick the channel that best fits the audience and the message that you have. What we're seeing now is differences in preferences by categories, by age groups, if you will. And we know, and the research would support, that the millennials interact with information in a very different way than older generations. And they do it both in terms of what they want to see in terms of content, how quickly they want to peruse it, and how deep they want to go. It's really about them having choice to go further into the information relationship, whereas older generations tend to want to see it all, and then they can skim and scan according to what they want to do.
Right. So this, and I feel like too with the millennials, with this screen, you don't know me, right? That there is almost this expectation, Netflix knows what movies I like, right? Pandora knows what music. How does my alma mater not know me and know what I like? So it feels like there's this lack of tolerance. If they get a big, long, newsletter from the university and they got to sift through it, are you saying that's not really working for them?
Yeah, to some extent. I think it feels like the university is disrespecting them because their lived experience is that these content providers or these media channel generators seem to know what they want and they deliver it. And at the same time, those same channels figure out how that person is changing over time. So if you're on Netflix, it suggests movies to you. And then as you start to watch other movies or documentaries or listen to music, it learns from that and it grows with you. And that's what that group of people and future generations are going to do this even more so. That's what they expect.
Right. So how can Netflix know I binge watch House of Cards and, the Musketeers don't know that about me, right? So next one, I loved how you with your, innovative approach and leadership here on this campus, Scott, you really took all of that communication information and holistically looked at it. So sometimes in the higher ed world, there's different siloed departments. Development is its own thing, alumni relations is its own thing, communication is its own thing, but you really looked at this holistically and saw how all of the ways that they are communicating can have an impact on giving. So I want to dig into that a little bit deeper where, we talk about those baby boomers sort of feeling obligated, 50% give because they feel like it's the right thing to do. I give to my alma mater because that's the right thing, where that millennial might not necessarily feel that obligation. But yet, when it was connected to a passion, they gave. So this is interesting. I know that we've talked about this where your average millennial is graduating with $35,000 worth of college debt. What do you say to them? And let's talk about when they first leave this campus, what was the concern there in your thinking about when they're going to leave and are straddled with this?
Sure. It actually starts as we try to recruit students. And it's about value proposition. What is it that the student and the student's family wants out of the college experience? And of course they want to be educated. And at a residential campus, of course they want to grow and develop as a human being and as a citizen. And of course they want to be employed upon graduation or go to graduate or professional school, or in our case, we have quite a number of students who go volunteer intentionally for a year or two with things like the Jesuit Volunteer Corps. And all along we talk about what this will cost financially, but what is the value that you get out of it. So talking to our students about debt and choice and how they fund things is very normal. As we talk about the value proposition, we talk about the community. One of our taglines, because we're the Musketeers, is all for one and one for all. That calls us to get to know them, and it calls us to stay in relationship with them. And that was one of the gaps we had as students would leave and they would immerse themselves in growing a family and growing their career. It became very difficult to stay in touch with them, and we were looking for a solution for that.
Right, and it's unfortunate too that when they do leave, their then participation rate, again, this wasn't just here, but overall it shows that that's going down. And so I know there was a sense of urgency, with you and your team to sort of address this issue. And I loved how you said, it's kind of like once you're in the family, you're always part of that family. So how do we manifest that in an online and innovative experience?
And I think your use of the word family is right on point. So every university these days seems to refer to it as Xavier Nation or Cornhusker Nation or things of that nature. And I think what the universities are trying to do is to send a signal that we have friends and alumni all over the country. We tend to think of it in terms of family, that once you are part of us, we are also part of you. And just because you graduate doesn't mean you're not part of the family. So what we're trying to do is to keep that familial relationship going.
Got it. Again, I want to touch on this again. We talked about, some misnomers about millennials. I know that, some of us feel like they don't give, but they actually do. They might not feel that allegiance per se to their alma mater, but the number one reason why they're giving is out of passion. So if Xavier's doing something on hunger, hey, I might sign up for that. I know that 62% gave via mobile device. Again, the average donation was, $25. And again, another stat, the millennials' average donation per year is $481. So they do give. I wanted to make sure that we pointed that out today, that that's sort of a myth that they don't give. But I think to know that they will, and like you said, when you're part of the family, your family cares about you and they care about who you are.
Absolutely. And I think that the passion is key there. We're all a product of our environments, how we were raised, the school systems that we went through, the generations, what's going on in society. And we know this in our classrooms, that when the students become very passionate about it, and when the faculty can integrate their passion with the content and skills that need to be learned, students come alive, and they feel known, and they feel respected. So what we were trying to do is understand what was really working in the classroom and in the residence halls and the extracurricular activities, and mimic that type of interaction or relationship building as we contacted them after they graduated.
I love the fact, though, I feel like Xavier at some times really mimics this idea of this Waterloo study that we had, Waterloo study that really showed the impact of just by engaging their audience, by moving that needle by 1%, it equated to $9,200 in lifetime giving. Now that's going to be more if you're Harvard, less if you're a smaller school, but again, that point is if you can engage them, it does impact giving and it does bring all that back full circle. So one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on our show today is I feel like more than any other university that we've talked to, there was a real sense of urgency, almost like this winter is coming. And I don't know who's Game of Thrones fans out there, you will get this. This is, the infamous Jon Snow, and I know you've got some professors that love Game of Thrones. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you know that about your staff or not, mm-hmm. But the idea that there is going to be a winter of disengagement that is going to visit your campus if this warning is really not met, if people don't sort of heed the warning of you've got to get to know who these kids are and tap into their passion and interest and talents, you're going to get that silent treatment later on down the road.
Absolutely, and I think that will feel very natural to young alumni. If you look back over time, it's very difficult to capture the attention and the commitment of people who just left, and you may lose them for 10 or 15 years historically. And this is now made more difficult because the channels that we used to use that would pick up or re-engage those people over time are not going to work with millennials, and it's going to work even less well with Generation Z. So we knew that even while we were running our existing university relations and development functions, we need to create a new process for the millennials and future students.
All right, so we're going to jump into sort of the innovative solution that we came up together. Before we do that, I just want to revisit some points. Again, you were talking about when students leave, this is the task at hand. How do you keep them part of the Xavier family? And you also mentioned, the most predictive variable for student retention is that engagement with a faculty member. So the task at hand was really going to be to this life cycle. I want you to dig into this. You had mentioned this when we were, meeting, over the years we've worked together. Can you talk about this student life cycle and sort of the impact of keeping them engaged all along the way?
Sure. I think this life cycle works for every university. We all have our own missions. Our accreditors evaluate us in terms of how well we enact being a university or a college with respect to that mission. And part of our mission is to make sure that the students are engaged with us and each other from the first time they say they want to come here, the first time they visit, the first time they step on campus as a student. Everything is focused on getting them to engage the learning process, us as faculty and staff, and each other. So as we do that, they come to expect that in how people interact with them and the information that we share with them. Then, across the 4 years that they're here, they have learning experiences in the classroom. They have learning experiences outside of the classroom in sort of the student affairs arena. They have learning experiences through internships and summer jobs, study abroad, intensive service, things of that nature. And the faculty do a really good job of listening to them and pulling that back into the core curriculum, which a state school would be the general education, back into the majors, into capstone experiences and things of that nature. So what the students experience over 4 years is this integrated approach to caring about them, knowing them, and engaging them. The sense of community grows out of that. So 2 years ago, we worked with the students to come up with a student commitment statement, and the students wrote it themselves. What we found stunning is that without seemingly trying, the word together shows up 5 times, and the student commitment is only about 60 words long.
Interesting.
So they just said, we're in this together, we learn together, we grow together, we do service together, and we're going to change the world together. And that just made us feel great. And then the next question is, how are we going to keep all of this together when you graduate as engaged alumni?
And how are you going to keep it together with budget cuts and cuts in the departments and limited resources and with all of the changing dynamic of how people get their information? So we are now going to jump into the part of the webinar where we really talk about how we innovated a solution and took all of these concepts and tied this together to really close the loop between what you're doing from a communication standpoint, what that means from an alumni relations standpoint, and what that means from a development standpoint to bring all of these items full circle. So our solution was sort of automating this personalization experience. And the way that this works is that our platform takes all the amazing things that Xavier's doing. What are you doing in athletics? What are you posting on YouTube, Vimeo, Facebook, Twitter? You have invested tons into your content strategy. So we take all of Xavier's content and we grab it. Then what happens on the back end is that we take each individual story. Now this is matching this deciphering what the information is about, but cross-referencing that with the interest of your audience. And we're going to show how we grabbed Xavier's alums' interest here in a couple slides. So we've got the information, we've got it tagged, it sort of sets up in a content cloud. And this becomes one of 6 pieces of information that really fuel this personalization all automatically on the back end. So to your point, Scott, we're gonna ask, what do you care about? And I know we even had some of those interests of your millennials. We were able to pre-populate some of that, but we're gonna continue that experience. You know what, you're an alum, we care about you, we care about your needs. So we're gonna ask them. These are topics that you can pick, and we're gonna show you this flow, how this works live here in a minute. Again, it's all about them, their schedule. So instead of Googling when's the best time to send out an e-newsletter, your staff doesn't have to do that anymore. We're gonna ask that alum, what's the best time? Scott, you might be a morning person and want it at 8 a.m. I might be a night owl. I might want it at 11 p.m. The point is they get to pick what's best for them. Then we ask them their format. This really gets to that baby boomer versus millennial type situation. Those baby boomers might want a traditionally laid out newsletter, where your millennial, they might just want the headlines. They get to personalize even the format that they receive their news. Now, implicitly, we are going to have this Netflix type behavioral analytics where I might not have told you that I really love innovation and technology or green stuff in green sustainability, but everything that's coming out of the university, that's what that alum is reading. So our platform knows this and will continue to order up stories in that order based on what they're telling us implicitly. And this one's really important. When you talked about that faculty member and really making that connection, we have this following piece where that student can continue to follow that professor, that coach, that cafeteria person that really made an impact on them. So this is how it actually works. Again, when you're imported, we'll take Xavier's live screenshot. These are the things that they can pick from. What do you care about? Then it's going to ask them what schedule works best for you. I know you guys have your default at every 2 weeks, but if somebody wants to override that and they want to get something daily, they're able to do that. The next one is they get to pick their format. So again, headlines, if they want something in between that, headlines plus, with this is going to take me this long to read this story, we're going to tell you that. Or they can get that traditionally laid out, beautiful newsletter.
So if you could go back to that.
Sure.
So when I was exposed to this at first, I was very curious which one I would pick. And
Which one were you going to pick? Or did you pick?
Well, I thought I wanted traditional, and it was too much. And I ended up with Headlines Plus. And I was skeptical at first when it said this is a 1-minute read or this was a 3-minute read. But it actually is a good estimate of how long it takes to go through that. And so I fit one of these profiles of millennials, baby boomers, or the traditionals, we'll call them.
Well, I'm glad we were able to personalize
Yes.
your university's news for you. And so this is awesome, where now you get to really capitalize. They can share, this is where that virility starts to happen. I can now share to all my friends on Facebook that I follow Xavier, and this really grows that community that you're talking about, because now I might not be that person that can connect that student to the engineer you need, but I can post it to my social network and make those meaningful connections, really capitalizing on the Xavier family as well. So that's in there. So now what they see is each subject line is personalized. This is one of my subject lines that I got from Xavier's issue just last week. And now everything is personalized just for me based on my interest. So all of these stories are things that I love, that I'm interested in, and that's what's going to show up in my newsletter. Now, the good point about this is this work of trying to always listen to, the audience and their interest. It's all automated. This is sort of this engagement loop that now you're listening to your audience and the site is responding, getting that right message to the right person at the right time based on their interest and what made them a unique student, here in the first place. So this is some more screenshots. If you can look at, these are 3 different alum. Their interests are all different. You see the first kid is interested in history, innovation, and he wants to follow this Professor Gary. And the second woman, she's a little bit different interest. She's interested in 3D printing. So if you lean into your screen, you can see that the first story for her is first, but it's second for the first guy, if you see that. And the reason why is because that story matches more of her interest. So it's going to be first, it's going to show up first. We want to help you rebuild that trust with your alums so that you get them to really lean in and start listening. So everything that I get from Xavier, I know it's going to be something that's personally meaningful to me. The third kid, he's interested in 3 completely different things, and that's okay. Now when the university does, want to kick off their annual giving program, you can still push that content. We've got all those controls built in. I know that was important to your communication department, and we worked with them to build all that in. And now every university can have a lot of those really great innovative moderation controls.
And if you look at these stories, it's about people. So off on the right side of the screen, Leah Minetti, who runs our Center for International Education, the students who care about study abroad would have worked with Leah during their 4 years here. So it maintains that connection. They can see her on the screen as they do in their mind's eye. When you look at the juniors in the history department doing service projects, our students would have done that here. So it continues that feeling of, oh, I know what they're talking about. I went through that. But it's all about the people and the work that the people do, how it is an expression of the university, and therefore it's an expression of what our alums did when they were students.
Well, and the other thing I want to point out too is, the story about history, from a communication department perspective, that might not made the newsletter, right? It might not made the top alumni magazine story or what have you, but this person truly cares about that, and it's going to re-engage them back into the community. So really giving that full personality of what everyone is doing here on campus and having that opportunity to personalize it for each alum is such a great value.
Absolutely, and one of the unintended consequences that we found of using Cerkl is that people within the campus community, the faculty and staff, use this to find out what's going on. Because we, like every other university, we have our newsletters, and we have a weekly, or during the academic year, bi-weekly emails that go out to everybody. They give announcements of events that are happening, but they don't really give the story, and they don't talk about the people. So the faculty and staff use Cerkl to find out what's going on in other parts of the university that they care about and they might want to be involved in.
Fantastic. I love that internal engagement as well. Again, control, I know if you're a person like me and you wear a marketing and communication hat, this is important. It's important to have things be responsive. You want it to all look great on all mobile devices. It all comes from your brand. It all comes from you. But you, again, there's a lot of control features. I know this is important. So this is really the power. So, sometimes universities might only have a few pieces of information about their alums, first name, last name, maybe what they graduated with 20 years ago, right? But people change over time. And so we fill in, Cerkl fills in what their interests are right now. So now it's sort of like scaling that major gift officer, that one-to-one engagement. And of course, we can feed that back into whatever CRM you're using.
And that, I think, is a key feature, and it's something that we worked closely with you, is once we have this information, how do we put it into our databases so that anybody who has a right and a responsibility to use it can gain access to that information. And those people who really don't need to know this information about our alums, we can prevent them from gaining access to it.
That's correct. So what's interesting is now you've got this really, your list transforms and evolves into this rich asset database. So if you are putting on that alumni golf outing now, this is where we start to sort of close the loop between alumni relations. Say they're planning a golf event and the registrations are low. Who is everybody in our audience that loves golf? Or maybe a professor needs a speaker about marketing and they want to use an alum to come back in. Who has that skill of marketing? So you can really now search all of the assets of this Xavier family and connect them back to the university in meaningful ways.
And the way you describe that is exactly how it works. It isn't just about pushing information or content out. It's about dialogue. So when a professor needs to do something, he or she could send a message out, which gets picked up by Cerkl, goes out to the people who care about that discipline, and they could see that Professor Chadwick wants to talk about this type of organizational practice and is looking for somebody in a particular industry who might want to share their experiences with the students. And that is a crucial type of engagement that we really didn't have access to before unless I or another professor specifically knew somebody. And what we found is that they tended to have a fairly small network of people who would give back, and this is growing their network and reconnecting them with their former students.
Yes, and I love that it creates that emotional connection, because ultimately when people feel engaged, they're twice as likely more to give financially, at the end of the day anyway. And I know that, that your intent was to keep that family going and to engage them in their values and interests, but for it to manifest itself in those other ways too is
Yes.
nice added value to the university. Again, insights, we've just taken some high-level screenshots of your insights, but the point here is because each piece of content that the university is producing gets an engagement score. So this is going to let that communication and marketing department know what's resonating, but more importantly, what's not resonating. Other universities that have used our platform, I know, use this to even determine what goes in that alumni magazine, because they kind of get dinged, on what's the ROI on all this stuff that we're putting out there, right? The other interesting part about our analytics is that we're going to tell you who's the most engaged and least engaged. And I remember talking to folks from development saying, we know what board members we've got, that if they fall out of the top 30, we're gonna know that. So, I think it's even more important to know who is not engaged, and we're going to tell you what those people's interests are.
We find these analytics very valuable, both to see just organically what matters to people. And then we do use this to modify the types of messages that we say at different types of years. I know that in some of my messaging, whether it was blog or talking about when we started the Center for Innovation, I could use this to track what was playing well, what people were interested in. And I just wanted to give them content that I thought mattered to them and that they would then use. And we used Cerkl's analytics to do that.
I know we'll even tell you, sometimes we were even finding that people were having trouble or not having time to sift through the data. So we even give you a cheat sheet now on the top of your content where we'll tell you, hey, these are the 5 things that are trending in your audience. And these are things that you talked about that really resonated, but you haven't talked about in 30 days. And then once I know you guys start talking about them, then they fall off the list, which is really fun to see. So this is your case study. You guys were on Constant Contact, started at a 19% open rate. Now you're above a 50. Your click-through rate, though, was, I know, something of interest that your department and your faculty were really wanting to know. That's great if they're opening it, but are they truly beginning to engage more than ever with the content? So you can see that your click-through is at 12. And the favorite stat on this slide is that we've nearly eliminated your unsubscribe rate, which makes me really happy.
That's stunning. That is really stunning.
So, and just for maybe a large version to see how their click-through rate, you look at that, a 12.9 click-through rate. The national average is 2.9. So you guys are killing it in that area. And across all of our circles, we have a 22.9 click-through rate. And this is the point that I tell people, even if you don't use Cerkl, this idea of doing what Xavier did, really personalizing and customizing that experience through data, of knowing what their audience cares about and their interest, is really the way that it's trending and needs to go.
It was interesting when we started using these analytics because some of the people didn't understand what open rate or click-through rates meant.
Well, yes, and I think when that now they're in tune with that and be able to watching that and watching, Cerkl gives you an overall engagement score. You can kind of develop that language easily among, your staff of, are we truly getting the most that we can out of, our communication. The other thing that we don't want to spend too much time on this, but that we have thought about is this idea, now that you've got that engaged audience, you have something that your business and your sponsors really want, and that is an engaged audience. So I know sometimes with universities, they'll go to corporate partners and want to put their logos on scoreboards and things like that, but this really bridges that gap between marketing and sponsorship. And this is a way to take that communication channel that once was an expense and now turns it into a revenue generator for the college. This is another feature that we can always talk more about, offline. So the ease of this, I know when we worked with you guys, we were trying to make it really easy to switch from, constant contact to us. You don't have to design newsletters anymore, and it was really saving that staff time of what they would be designing to now they can make those really informative decisions when we're talking about strategy.
And when I'm onboarding new employees, whether they're staff members or faculty members, there's a nice 1-2 connection here where the first thing we do is help them sign up for Cerkl if they want to. And they really do marvel at how easy it is. And then once they start getting the Cerkl emails, then they say, well, how could I get my content up there? How could I become known? Isn't this a way for me to get my voice out there? And in fact, it is.
Well, and to have that internal benefit, I think, to the staff is important because you've got faculty members doing great blogging and having so many great projects that if that could just get to the right alum or that right student, it's so valuable to them. So I want to leave with today with just kind of going over some points. Again, we really want this to be valuable to our audience today and give them sort of principles that Cerkl was built on. So I want to just sort of review some of these now before we end our time today and before we start to take questions from the audience. But really, Xavier has tried to keep that on-campus experience with your students to continue that and customize that experience, but you're doing that through innovation and through data now. So we wanted to continue to do that. This guessing game has sort of ended for you guys.
Very much so.
So now you know what the answers to the test are and how to engage people.
And what we find the alums are doing is when they're getting the content about things that matter to them, effectively they have created a new affinity group. And they have their other forms of communication. So they have Facebook and Snapchat and myriad other ways of communicating with each other. And they're able to take the content that we provide through Cerkl and push it out to their other friends and their other networks through other media that we don't control, nor would we want to control.
So it's a complementary
Absolutely.
piece. Do you want to talk about this next one? This giving the whole campus a voice.
Sure, everybody knows that they can create content. And as you had said earlier, while we always want to make sure that the messages that are sent out resonate well with our mission and our vision and our culture, and we really haven't had any problem with that, this tells people that if you are doing something amazing and you've touched students' lives and you think you should share this, then they can write that up, whether they blog it or do a press release or point to a web page or whatever the channel is. Cerkl will pick it up and kick it out to those alumni who really care about this and are passionate about what they did.
Next one, I love this idea. You've got those major gift officers out there having those coffees with, those alums. And it makes me feel good that although those millennials might not have the capacity to give right now, they're going to feel just what that would feel like if a major gift officer was assigned to you.
It's interesting because having been with Cerkl since it started on campus, I know how the sausage is made, if you will. But even when I get my weekly message, it still feels like the university is speaking directly to me because all I get are the things that I really am passionate about. One of the things that surprised me, though, was a number of times I'm out and about in the city, whether I'm at an event or I'm grocery shopping or whatever, and somebody will come up to me and say, "Hey, Scott, this is really cool what Xavier did." And I'll think, yeah, it is. How did you find out? And almost exclusively now they say, well, I got it off my Cerkl feed.
Yeah.
So it has really extended our reach.
Very nice. Again, I want to mention this idea of your communication being responsive. It has to look good on mobile devices. If it sort of looks wonky, people will jump out. Mm-hmm. And you might be finding this with your own experience on campus to really make sure and to keep in mind that people are getting all that information, through tablets and phones, and then it's all really got to be responsive and look good. And this is really the last point, is really giving your business partners, your alumni, your students, it's really about them and what they need, right? And to plant those seeds now so that you avoid that disengagement winter.
Yes, and it flows perfectly with how we cultivate students as learners across the 4 years that they're with us. We're always talking about, what are we doing now? What do you need to learn now? But the faculty know why they need to know it, because it's always going to be used as a foundation for something else in the future. So students find this very normal and very organic.
The other stat, again, that might empower you to, if you're going back to your director of your department, that this personalizing content is really where things are going and have to go. This one-size-fits-all communication, I think we're going to look at that and think, wow, that was a dinosaur, back in the day. So again, if you don't use Cerkl, the point of this webinar, though, is really to teach the principles and the concepts for the solution that we've come up with, but to teach your departments and to teach your faculty and staff that this is really the way that things are trending if you really want to sustain that connection and that relationship with the alums.
When you think about how technology is used, everybody will give technologists a break when the technology is doing the best that it can. So I grew up in a house where we had a party line on telephone with four. I'm a little aged, but so we had a party line, and that was the best we could do. We were glad to have a phone. And nowadays, if somebody doesn't have a cell phone, or better yet, a smartphone, people wonder, well, why not? Or if an organization isn't communicating through those devices, they would say, why not? Are you incompetent in some way? Do you not care at all? Do you not care about me? And those are natural questions people have when technology is deployed. And we are really satisfied with how Cerkl keeps being at the front, not the bleeding edge, but just the front edge of what technology can do. And they come to us and say, you come to us and say, how can we help? Here's a new feature. Would this matter to you? Do you want to do it? So we are in partnership. We are in a relationship, Xavier to Cerkl. And really, it's the individuals at Xavier and the individuals at Cerkl.
Well, and I think too, that is an important point. I've heard other universities talk about this, that vendors and it should be partnership. Mm-hmm. It should be that we are trying to solve for what it is that you're thinking about all the time, and now it's what we think about all the time. All right, I want to move towards our question and answer session. The way that this works, we've got a few minutes left to take some live questions. It's sort of like when you were scared in the 3rd grade and you didn't want to ask that dumb question. We account for that. So when we take questions, you can type them in. Your name will not appear, but we will read the question for the benefit of everyone in the audience. So the first question is, can you talk about what kind of integration Cerkl has with iModules? Certainly we integrate with iModules on the back end. We have an API that talks to your back end system. It's like our tech people talk to your tech people, and it magically works. So if you have more questions about in the weeds on the technical aspect of how all of that works, again, ping me offline and we will explain that more in depth. The other more questions that are coming up is, what if we struggle to produce content? So we get this question from some smaller shops, but I'll share with you that Cerkl has an external feed feature where if you struggle to produce content on your campus, you can pull in industry news and industry blogs. A lot of our universities that are using this platform to engage students like this feature, because students who have different career interests can get the latest and greatest trends. You can set all of those outside feeds for moderation, but it really provides value, back to the student or back to the alum. So you can have different, external feeds. Is my content archived? Yes, we provide, as part of your subscription, a content archive page where everything stays. This is nice, not only for your alums if they've missed something and want to go back and search, what are all the stories that's going on? Again, I'll use that green sustainability feature, but this also is nice because it helps the university's SEO. We've really thought about that on the back end. So to increase that part of your communication strategy. Getting more questions in here. Pricing. So pricing is more affordable than you would think. we have worked with lots of universities. I know they're always shocked at what our costs are. It's probably less than what you're paying now, and we start our rates, as low as $99 a month. So it is based on the number of active email addresses that you have. But one thing I do want to mention, and it sort of shocked us, Scott, when we were working with you guys and with other universities, that you've really been burned by software companies. This was shocking to me. So we've taken all of that into account. There's no upselling. If your list grows, we don't double the price. It doesn't increase. We've really accounted for that. All right. What if I have more than one audience segment? Yes, you can have different segments of your audience. We also work with an example, University of Dayton. They have 38 alumni chapters across the country. Each one of those are segmented out as part of their Cerkl platform. So you definitely can do different segmented types of situation. All right, we're still getting some more questions in here. I'm just reading through all of them. What if I have a student intern producing my newsletter now? Great question. They can still produce it. Again, you can set everything that they have on moderation so that it doesn't go out unless you approve it. So another great question.
An example of that, so when we started our Center for Innovation a couple years ago, it was the center director and myself who were blogging about that and creating all the content. And then the students found out about it. And we had 2 paid student interns. We had that much money in the budget. 11 students intern with us. So 9 of them don't get paid. They're just so fascinated by what we're doing there that they wanted that as part of their experience. And then they asked us, well, could we start writing about this?
Yes.
So I don't write about innovation any longer because I think people want to hear from the students actually doing it more than they want to hear from me as provost.
Well, and it's nice, again, that really amplifies, the voice of the university. So, all right, I think we've got one more question in here. How easy is it to get started? Great question. I know that some people ask us, is it cost extra for training? Does it, what is the process to do this? And really, if we have to train you, number one, then we haven't built a great platform. We do provide some acclimation to the platform, but really there's no training required. One of the things that we do, if you do want to get started, and that's why we have Let's Test, is we want to remove any barrier or any fear that you might have to using a new software or new technology. So we provide a really engaging testing experience for you, so that way you can see how it works, if it works and does everything that we're saying that it does. And only when you're happy and really confident, then you can say, all right, this is for us. So we let you completely test it. And even that process of testing, I know even here at Xavier, when we were able to pull in some of your influencers, just the fact that you're saying we are trying to personalize this experience with our alum to bring those alumni back, the very fact that you're testing it is another value add. Whether you want to use the platform or not, just that step is valuable in re-engaging those alums.
It really is. And one of the concerns I had at first was how much time is this going to take away from people to learn how to use this and to get content out there. And I was shocked at how easy the system is. We have had no complaints from any faculty, staff, students, or alumni in how do I get on, how do I make this personalized to myself. This product really works.
Well, I appreciate, again, I love aligning with folks that have the same values and fundamental belief. You're such a great leader, Scott, and we just, have loved our partnership and really, jointly being on this adventure of how to engage, not only millennials, but, your alumni and even internally with the staff. So thanks for being with us here today.
Thanks for letting us.
And if you have any more questions, or if you would love to do a test, we'd love to do that with you. Feel free to email Scott if you've got more questions about Xavier, or email me at sarah@cerkl.com. And this has been just a wonderful experience that we've had, again, partnering with the higher ed community. We will be sending you a follow-up email with links and sort of a summary so that it would be easy if you do want to forward this on to departments. Sometimes it's easy to have an email with the first wheel created and you can just simply forward it on. You will all be getting that. Look for that in your inbox shortly. Thanks so much, and thank you for helping us engage your audience like never before.